So in my opinion, based on my a review of the evidence, based on my clinical experience, based on my publishing experience, based on my teaching experience, that Mr. Depp has behaviors that are consistent with both someone who has a substance use disorder as well as consistent behaviors for someone who is a perpetrator of intimate partner violence. So again, in terms of the acting part, we do know that he needed his lines fed to him for movies. Part of that could have been also due to, and I don't know which movie, and please forgive me about that, that he actually confessed he did a movie entirely wasted. So I imagine it would be harder to do that. Additionally, like I said, when I looked at deposition, you can tell that the processing speed was down. His thinking rate was down. If your thinking rate is down, and I'm not talking about, again, I'm getting older. I'm probably not as sharp as I was at 25, okay? But I'm talking about it so slow that when we're trying to move on to other questions, we're still trying to answer the original data that's presented to us. So attention span is very much impaired. And if your attention span is impaired, your memory is going to be impaired. It is inescapable that that's going to happen. So all that comes into play there. And that's what I witnessed in the video deposition. Fortunately for Mr. Depp, I do see that during this trial, his cognition has improved somewhat, which will happen if you are sober. So I commend him on that. But again, I'm specifically referencing the time with Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's relationship. So we're talking about that. So during the video deposition, what was readily apparent was a gentleman who had a significant delay in processing speed. And like I said, when you have a delay in processing speed, many other cognitive functions are going to follow. You're going to be impaired attention, concentration, memory. All that's going to happen. In terms of having to, the speech process, if you heard the deposition, the way the thoughts were conveyed were much more in the way of kind of disconnected, disjointed statements. It wasn't that they were not necessarily understandable, but they didn't have any coherent pattern until he was more structured by Ms. Bredehoff to kind of get to the point of the question, which happened throughout most of the deposition. And so you could see there that there was obviously some form of cognitive issue that should not be happening in someone in their mid-50s, and it, probably due to the alcohol and substances.
What, if any, record evidence do you have that correlates with Mr. Depp being narcissistic?
Well, I do think that the fact that he thought that Amber owed him, Ms. Heard owed him.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. Thank you. Go ahead.
The fact that Ms. Heard owed him and only wanted to be together with him because of his fame is an example of that. I do think the jealousy aspects are an example of that. I do think, as I think Mr. Tillett had testified that, being admired is one thing, but then behind your back saying something else about people is another thing. And I can probably say with a reasonable certainty that to some degree this whole trial is that.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
That's not record evidence. Speculation.
Please continue.
That this whole trial, in terms of narcissistic insult, is what's going on.
Well, why don't we talk about what you just testified to, because I didn't ask you anything about that. I asked you whether, under this rubric, under this principle of medical ethics, have you acted unethically? Yes or no?
No. As an expert witness, I have not acted unethically. And if you want the jury to believe that expert witnesses are unethical, then I guess that's for them to decide.
Yes
And
or
that's
no,
for them
sir.
to
You
decide.
said no. Let's go to the next question.
Okay.